Cool. So we're now going to move over and start talking to Anna. This is obviously Labcate are our sponsors for the track. We've got Anna from Labcate talking about bringing new life to your game. Hopefully Anna will be joining us on screen shortly. I think this is really interesting to talk to Matthew about the way the IDFA is going to affect things, but also how the history we've been past this already. We've had similar changes in the past, we've adapted, and of course we'll adapt to this. And it does mean that we're going to have a change of mindset, change of the ways that we've optimized and have to optimize again. But again, thinking about how we can use that to affect and actually how we can integrate that with the game design as well is really interesting. I'm not too sure where Anna is at the moment. So I think we've Anna's been having some technical issues, so I'm going to keep talking for a little bit longer. One of the things that really struck me though in Matthew's talk, I know that one of the lessons from hyper casual has been to be able to use small amounts of particularly Facebook ad basis to test and try to gauge and estimate what the cost of install is likely to be for a new game. And it's actually a technique that we're starting to look at for longer term or casual or kind of retention focused games to basically try and see what the impact of individual changes are, and particularly around the awareness and value of the initial experience of the game. So it's going to be interesting to see how the sort of the change of the way that information is provided and maybe how much more work we have to do as game designers to integrate effectiveness of growing our game. But again, I also think that there's a wider question around this, which is about thinking about the other forms of marketing. Traditionally, we haven't found as much impact from doing PR and branding and social media and all that kind of stuff because it's harder to get the direct measures. Perhaps now there'll be a little bit more of a rebalance on that side. We know how important social media has become. We know how important community is. But in terms of user acquisition, direct user acquisition, they've obviously been the most important factor. So I think let's have a think. I think we're still waiting for Anna. So yeah, I'm just checking up on the notes here. So yeah, she's again, it's the internet issues, I think. So I think it's a vastly interesting and evolving space. And when you look at the context of that, as Matthew said, with the changing economic circumstances combined with the changing data circumstances, we're going to have to be much more crafty in the way that we think about the makeup and testing of our ads, and to make sure that we're as effective as possible. I think the efficiency of the UA team is again going to be critical to this process. And I think learning different skill sets, realizing the importance of creative, realizing the importance of placement within the game, as much as the importance of targeting the right games. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the design side is going to affect the user acquisition side. Normally, when we're talking about growth, we're not particularly worried about the game. But one of the lessons I learned back in the old days when I was Unity doing Unity ads was how important placement inside the game was for the effective monetization of the game. And I'm increasingly of the opinion that getting the player at the right point of decision where they actually do care about what ad they're seeing and they actually get value from doing that, that I think is going to have a knock-on effect on the effectiveness of the games that we target as well. Now, do I have any proof of that? Of course not. It's hard to measure those kind of things. But I do think it's an interesting space to try and explore. So if anyone else has any sort of questions or thoughts, we're happy to kind of try and answer them. And there was a question that was, what do we think about, can we do targeting of display ads? Unfortunately, it's not an area I know about, so I can't fill that one in. But I do think that we have had a lot of dependence on the specific mechanisms that we have provided for us by Facebook, by Apple, by Google, and we have had to work around that. Maybe we have to start thinking about new mechanisms, new alternative approaches, and like I say, I kind of hate to use the term, but there used to be a phrase, synergistic marketing. I know that's a horrible phrase, but thinking more about the role of the community you have playing a game and how you can feed that through. One of the things that we're experimenting with is, can you take live events and live operations and use that to feed expectation of what's going on in the game? So you can actually build, an audience awareness that there's a narrative of how your game is progressing, and seeing what effect that has, because we do know that more people see ads, the more they become familiar with your game, that makes them more likely to proceed if they are interested in that game. And my hypothesis by thinking is, how far could we go? How far could that happen, so that we can start telling stories about what's happening in our game world and creating a kind of desire to play? So I'm told reliably that you can hopefully not have to listen to me for the rest of the talk. And we have Anna, who's just been restarting her PC. Fingers crossed that's all working. And yes, here we go. So Anna's now rejoining us. So Anna, hey Anna, that's great. So it's all working now.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, it happens. It happens to the best of us. So I'm gonna take up no more time. So Anna from Labcate, our sponsors for the track, over to you.
All right, great, thank you. And sorry for the delay. I don't know what happened. I'm not technically savvy, so hopefully I can get you the information you're all here to hear as soon as possible. Really quickly, let me just stop my video, share my screen with you guys. And can you all see my screen? Hopefully
we can indeed.
You can. All right, fantastic. So thank you, Oscar, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming out to see the presentation today. I'm very, very sorry for the delay. But as Oscar mentioned, my name is Anna Frangogianni, and the name of my presentation is Bringing New Life to Your Game, a Case Study. If we were in person, I would ask all the developers and the publishers to raise their hands, but since we're not in person, unfortunately, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that the majority of you here are developers and publishers. So you all probably know how difficult it is to launch an app, let alone bring new life and revive an app that launched, but it didn't go as planned upon launch. Labcate was in a similar situation where we launched a game that we had a lot of faith in and we really believed in, but the results upon launch were not favorable. So what we did is we took a step back, we analyzed the data, we did a lot of research, and then we applied our ASO expertise in order to bring new life to that game. And hopefully, after I walk you through the process that we went through, you'll be able to take some useful snippets of information with you. So first and foremost, who am I? My name is Anna Frangogianni. I'm not Italian, I'm Greek. I am a business development executive, and I've been with Labcate for about 2 years now. You may recognize me as the person that sends out updates about Labcate's services. But beyond that, I'm also the go-to case study person at Labcate. This means that on a regular basis, I will approach the leads of our different departments, and if they're working on something absolutely noteworthy and something that is definitely worth sharing with the world, I will take that information, wrap it up in a nice package, which will then become a case study, and then I will go ahead and send you more emails with that case study. Additionally, I've characterized myself a little bit as a true millennial because about 80% of the time I'm tinkering on my phone on apps or I'm playing games. So working at Labcate is an absolute natural fit for me. Without further ado, who is Labcate? Hopefully you can see everything. Labcate is a mobile growth service provider. We've been around since 2013 and we are part of the Sun Media Group. Our main expertise is in ASO, but over the years we also started offering additional services such as monetization, publishing, and ad mediation. And since our origin in 2013, we've launched over 700 apps, multiple of which have reached #1 upon release. We've also achieved over 200 million organic installs, and we are backed by a beautiful ASO team of 50 people who are obsessed with data. So how am I going to structure this presentation? I am going to focus a little bit on ASO to give you a recap and tell you a little bit more about why ASO is as important as it is. And I'm going to give you this recap because our approach to our game and our ability to bring new life to our game was done through an ASO lens. So you need to be able to have this little foundation in ASO to be able to understand what we did in the case study that I'm going to present to you. So first and foremost, why is ASO so important? ASO is very, very important, although it might not be a digital marketer's first choice because it is what is going to, at the end of the day, bring the longevity and the newfound consistent organic user baseline to your game. ASO is not was probably not the first choice because it's tedious, it requires a lot of research, it requires a lot of testing, and then what is going to be put out in the store, you won't necessarily get the results immediately. You're going to have to wait a couple of months before the ASO iterations kick in and you start seeing fantastic results. So it is a bit of a long-term process, but at the end of the day, it's definitely worth it. So what is ASO? ASO stands for App Store Optimization, and ASO in a nutshell is the process of bringing visibility to your app in the respective stores. ASO can be broken down into metadata and CRO. Metadata deals with the keywords, and keywords in ASO and on your app stores are very, very important because at the end of the day, the keywords are what bring visibility and the exposure to your app, and not just any visibility and exposure, but the visibility and exposure of the right audience, of the audience you're looking for. So once you have that visibility and exposure through your keywords, you really want to be sure that you have a solid CRO strategy. So you want to have a CRO stands for conversion rate optimization. So you definitely want to be sure that your assets are aligned with the keywords that you're using and they appeal to your user base, because that way that visitor who's browsing around your store will get a good idea of the game that they're about to download and will go ahead and download that game and turn into an install. Those two put together form ASO, and a strong and solid ASO strategy will also in the long term help you with running external campaigns, as solid ASO overall makes your average cost per install cheaper. So now what we've all been waiting for, our case study. Our case study is focused on a game that we published. It's a narrative-driven game called Love and Dating Story. And as briefly mentioned, the game upon launch did not perform the way we were hoping it would perform. So the team had to take a step back, analyze the data, do a heck of a lot of research, and then after applying the results that they found through the research through our ASO expertise, we were able to achieve a 314% increase in installs just on Google Play alone. So what brought on the revamp? I'm just gonna move this a little bit. Upon release, iOS had a large number of pre-orders and many, many good reviews. We had about 500,000 pre-orders when we went live on iOS. However, Google Play did not follow the same pattern. It hardly had any installs, and in the first couple of weeks that it was live in the store, it was at most getting about 30 installs a day. So especially on Google Play, those are not numbers that you're happy with. So clearly some adjustments were something went wrong and some further adjustments were needed. So the first thing we did was research. We started with doing a thorough competitor analysis where we looked at what type of icons our competitors were using, what type of screenshots, the call to actions they were using, their long descriptions, their short descriptions, and their titles. Then we did a thorough user research, and it's actually quite interesting because initially our game was targeted at teenage girls and high schoolers, but after doing our competitor analysis and additional research, we realized that our true audience on average was 40-year-old women. So it was back to the drawing board, figuratively and literally, where we had to research a whole new bunch of metadata. We had to identify new keywords for our long description, our short description, and our title. And then we also had to do research on our creative assets. So we had to figure out a way to tastefully age up the assets that we already had in order for them to coincide with our new user base and all the research we had done. Of course, you can't just apply your hypotheses, you have to test. So we started our testing through Splitmetrics, and Splitmetrics is an external testing tool. And what we did there was we tested the different art styles. After we had tested a number of art styles and we came out with one that we liked, we started testing directly on the Google Play console, where we started running A/B tests, and gradually we moved on to testing the metadata. Here you're going to get a bit of a snippet of our icon progression. So this is the icon that was available when the game was launched in March 2019 on iOS. As you can see, the girl is very young, very sweet, very innocent looking. She's holding a maths book and the background is lockers. So it's truly an icon that's oriented for a younger audience, for high schoolers. Then a little bit of an element of romance is introduced, additional characters are introduced, but it's still very young. The characters still look very innocent. They have these really, really big eyes. This is when we started testing a truly different art style. And you can see there's still that element of a sweet romance in a high school setting again, or a school setting. But this time the eyes get smaller. So you can tell the innocence is not quite there anymore. In September 2019, which is when we also started testing rigorously on Google Play, the sweet romance is gone. It's all about passion and jealousy, as you can see by the gentleman in the background who's looking on jealously. But also something very important that we did was that we removed the school background, because we felt that the school background was limiting the scope of the game. As some of you know, narrative games have a variety of scenarios that you can join and be a part of. So that's why it was important to not have a specific background. Then in November, the icon is very similar. This is because, fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on how you want to look at it, our September icon was so strong that we couldn't actually develop any new icons, new renders to beat the existing icon. So what we did was we started changing small elements in the existing icon, and we applied what resonated the most with our user base. So Splitmetrics, this is a little bit what we did on Splitmetrics. As mentioned, Splitmetrics is an external testing tool. It works very similarly to Google Play, where you can test variants against your existing store page. What we did here is that this is when we started testing our different art styles. I hope you can see it. It's quite small, but the art styles are quite different, as are the screenshots with the call to actions, but our metadata has remained the same. So these tests were purely in order to identify what the new art style was that would resonate with our user base. Here you get a little bit more of an insight on what our Splitmetrics results and information were. So this was the existing screenshots lineup, and this was a new screenshot lineup. So just by changing the icon and changing the first 3 screenshots completely, as well as switching the order of the 4th and the 5th screenshots, we were able to see a 14% almost increase in conversion rate, engagement rate increased by almost 10%, as well as the average time that a user spent on the page. That also increased by a good 1.5 seconds. So overall, these small improvements led to a overall 30% improvement in the performance of the store page. We did a couple of tests like that until we settled on the new art style. And then once we had settled on the new art style, then that's when we started testing directly on Google Play. I'm sorry, my little panel is blocking my titles, but this is Google Play now. And here we tested the icons. This is an example of the icon tests we ran. As I mentioned, this was the very strong icon that we created, and it was difficult to beat it. So like I mentioned, we were just testing out and changing a couple of aspects. Here we added Holly, which, as you can see, did not resonate with our user base. But here we went to a completely new style of icon, and it really did not resonate with our new user base, with the 40-year-old women, as you can tell by the numbers, which are quite negative. However, here the same love icon did resonate with our user base, and this is the winning variant, and this is what we ended up applying to our app. Here you can see a little bit more of our screenshot progression. The screenshots were tested in the same way as the icon was tested, and similar as what you saw in the icon page, the art also ages up. So you have innocent, very sweet, oriented at high schoolers, a little bit less innocent, more realistic, and then you essentially, our artwork turned into what you would see on the cover of a romance novel a little bit. But what I wanted to focus on here was also the call to actions, because the call to actions are also very important, because they're what prompts the user to download the game. If you may, it's what might get them excited about your game. So here it's very innocent, nothing solid, where the young girl here with the blue hair is freaking out because the boy is looking at her. So this was more what resonated with high schoolers. But then here we start giving the users a bit of a better idea of what they can expect from downloading this style of game, this narrative driven game, where they are given the option to choose their comedy or their fate or choose drama. But still, it didn't feel quite right, and it wasn't resonating as much as we wanted. So after additional testing and also relying on the research that we had done on our competitors, we moved away from the simple choose your fate, choose your comedy, and we focused on the emotion. So we focused on desire and like verbs to couple with that emotion. So here we have enjoy desire, find romance, confront betrayal. And then our art team took it a step further, and through a little bit of color psychology, I believe, they also applied colors to those emotions. So they have desire as hot red, and then they have romance in pink, and fantasy in purple, and betrayal in blue. So you really were resonating with the new user base of the 40-year-old women, and this responded with them, and we was actually very successful testing. Here, after we were done testing with all our assets, we were done testing our icons and our screenshots, we focused on the metadata. The metadata was also tested on Google Play, but the last thing to test and to be implemented was the title. The title changes were essentially structured and based on what we learned from our competition research. However, what the team really decided to keep and insisted on keeping was to keep the keyword story in our title, because the keyword story brings high traffic volumes, and it also carries a large potential for combinations to make long-term keywords, which also brought high volumes of traffic. Additionally, after testing, we saw fantastic results and a lot of new visitors and installs coming through this title change. So that was also a success on the team's part. What were the overall results? Well, throughout the redesign and the testing period, we managed to achieve a 314% increase in our installs on Google Play. This translated roughly to about 450,000 new users. So Google Play managed to almost reach the heights of iOS upon its release. As you can see, it was a long-term process. It took 4 to 5 months for all the testing and all the research to be done, and for the new variants, assets, and metadata to kick in and finally take effect. Additionally, though, a little additional bonus for us was that because we were applying the new assets and the new user research on iOS as well, we managed to achieve an additional 49% increase in our iOS installs. So that was an additional bonus. Overall, we're very, very happy about how this project turned out. We're incredibly proud of our team for the amazing work that they did and how they were flexible enough to take a step back, analyze the data, and take such drastic changes, because more often than not you think, no, okay, my preliminary research is the correct one, I have to push to this audience, I can't be flexible. But no, that's not the case. You need to do your research, you need to follow the data, and then in our case, through our ASO expertise, we were able to create a whole new bunch of assets. As you saw, we were also able to create a whole new batch of metadata, which led to some fantastic results. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully I didn't go too over. I sped it up a little bit. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Oh, that was great. Perfect timing. It couldn't be better.
Okay.
Well, it's tough. It's tough when you kind of have technical issues. You don't want to try and, you don't want to sort of not have too much of a knock-on effect, but I totally get it. You did a great job as well, because what's key to me is just you go across just how much work there is in the whole research test process. And I think it's kind of fitting we got split metrics following you that you end up talking about them. So hopefully that's all good. So in terms of questions, there was a question here from Chichen. Did you change the game art style too, or is it just the App Store icon and the metadata?
First, we started changing the App Store, but gradually the art inside the game also started evolving to match what the users were seeing in the store.
And I think that's actually really interesting, because I know we've seen a lot of ads that are basically nothing to do with the game, and there's all sorts of controversy around that. But I'm of the opinion that the closer the narrative, the closer the experience.
Here I am. Sorry.
The closer the narrative, the closer the experience of the player to what they get, the more likely you're going to have a resonance.
Exactly.
Rather than a dissonance. And I feel like that's an important factor. I mean, there are reasons for doing both. I mean, there's lots of history around people doing crazy things with, real-time ad, like live video type stuff, which has nothing to do with the gameplay, and somehow that works. But it feels to me that it's more honest or more likely to deliver long-term retention. Have you seen anything around that?
Well, yeah, I mean, eventually, especially since we started targeting the correct audience, we also saw the session length increase. We also saw the lifetime values of our user increase, because the people that started playing our game after all our changes and all our adaptations were the people that were actually looking for this game, and they didn't feel like they were misled. So we also saw an increase in our game economy from that as well.
And just based on a question here from Saya, did you also see an increase in organic uplift from that? Did it make any impact on organics, or is it just, as in, I know you're getting App Store optimization, but were you seeing more people coming in after they saw other aspects of the game? Were you seeing, I know it's really hard to tell where the sources are, but from the attribution data, were you getting a sense that there were more social-led uplift as well?
Well, these changes were primarily resulted in an organic uplift, because Labcate, we're all about the organic. We rarely run.
I was using the wrong language. I was just trying to get the difference between people who go to the App Store versus, if you can find any kind of sometimes you can find attribution to social media through previous.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, this growth, what we saw was through the organic channels. It wasn't, we weren't running external paid campaigns. We weren't running, for example, campaigns on Facebook or Instagram or on other apps. This was through our organic channels, so through search and browse and search and explore.
Yeah, there wasn't just the fact you were converting more people who came to the page; you're actually getting more people to come to the page.
Exactly. That's where the keywords and the metadata was very important. That's why it was so important for us to identify the new audience and find the keywords that resonated with the new audience, because it's through those keywords that we were able to attract them to the storefront. And once they were at the storefront browsing around, that's when the assets come in. And it's very important to have the correct assets. For example, the correct icon, feature graphic, and screenshots on Google Play, because that's what they see. And that's how they more or less get the first idea of what they're going to be getting from the game. And that's when they decide if they're going to actually download the app.
Yeah, no, exactly. The reason why, the thing in the back of my mind though is I think there's a series of pathways of getting people.
Yeah.
Obviously, the ASO, the keywords is a key part of it. I
Hmm.
think the paid user acquisition where that's done can be very valuable.
Hmm.
But I think there's also that other aspect which I'm particularly fond of, which is to find ways to get people to socially recommend. And the trouble is with social recommendation, it's very difficult to differentiate between the
Oh
people
yeah.
keyword versus people who just happen to have gone find the site because their mate told them it was a great game. We
Yeah.
did some work a long time ago where we found out about a third of installs were coming from organic, but not just organic, but so one third were organic and one third were coming through social links.
Mhm.
So, and also in person sharing was part
Yeah.
of that social part. But again, it's so hard to track, and we only could do that by
Yeah.
doing a survey of people who had installed, which is of course not imperfect.
No.
So Anna, thank you so much for that. That was really
Yes.
fascinating. And again,
Thank you.
thanks Labcate for being sponsors of this great track.
Thank you. It was great. Hopefully this was useful. And because I'm not the most technically savvy person, am I going to the green room now, or am I?
It's up to you if you want to go to the green room or
Okay.
just stay listening. And we've got Olga now. In fact, what we'll do is Katie will bring Olga back into the panel side. And
Okay, great.
so thank you very much, Anna.